right, cool. So this is Retus. We're on it. The growth cultus, the devotional practice of self improvement. Next slide, please. So a huge part of what we're doing, purpose, is to become more like the Daewoi. Like Kuno touched on in the very beginning of the presentation. While Tyrannus fights overwhelming chaos, not just regular chaos, but overwhelming chaos that seeks to extinguish on a cosmic scale, we do so on a smaller, on a mortal scale, on everyday activities. And a big part of that is going to be tough. It's going to require a lot from us mentally and physically. And as such, we will do the best in our everyday lives by being the best in our everyday lives. Next slide, please. So the best way to do this is devotional acts. And a lot of this is just learning from the experts and the Daewoi who are absolute units in their field in this regard. What follows are some examples of the most important form of growth and associated activities and rituals. Next slide, please. So we have natural growth. Natural growth deals with nature. So appreciate the beauty of nature, always aid its growth, and always honor and protect it. Next slide, please. So the goal of this part of the cultus is to gain a better understanding of the natural worlds, plants, trees, animals, the land spirits, everything that's associated with that, as well as developing skills associated with that, which allows you to be in closer harmony. Next slide. So an amazing god to work with in this, or to take inspiration from, is I'm going to butcher it, Ambactanos, reconstructed from the Welsh Amethium, I think. He is the brother to the smith god, the one who knows the land and how to make it grow and can see the movement of the skies. In a lot of reconstructed spheres, he is actually projected as almost near omniscient because of his deep and harmonious understanding of nature. He can almost always tell what will come to pass. So if there's anyone that we should be taking notes from, it's this guy. Next slide, please. So ways to improve your own natural growth. Adopt a habit. You can volunteer at a garden or plant nursery. That way you can help nature around you, and you're also going to learn a skill or two when it comes to maintaining leafy green things. You can pick up trash wherever you go, and this is a huge one for a lot of us. It's just small scale impact that you can do, but if 20, 30, 40, 50 people do that every day, imagine how much cleaner and how much healthier the environment would be. Establish a routine where you take care of your local wildlife. So for me, it's a huge thing is that every Saturday I go to a park, and every Saturday I bring oats for the ducks. Shouldn't feed ducks bread. That's really bad for them, apparently. So oats are a healthy alternative. This way you can help supply the natural wildlife. You can nurture it, and you get a lot of benefits that way. So the next one we have is social and creative growth. Social and creative growth is about expressing yourself in your art form, but also strengthening the communities that you are a part of. Next slide, please. We're improving our individual artistic ability and social relationships. And what that leads to is a stronger community. Stronger communities can do more things because there's going to be more members and each member will be more capable. Next slide. So absolute master in this field would be Lugus or Lugos. While we all know Lugus, there's still very little that academia is willing to say about him for sure. He's a triple god shrouded in mystery, patrons of the arts, commerce, community, songs, poetry. He's an inspiration and a very powerful figure. He's universally agreed to be the Mercury Caesar describes. He's a cognate to Lu and possibly the inspiration for Odin and all of his cognates. and he is fantastic for two main things. One is deepening your artistic ability. Um, it's important on us to develop your artistic pursuits, but also picking up new art forms. You can teach someone something, share your art with the world. Um, be that getting out of your comfort zone and maybe picking up a block of wood and a knife and just carving away, even if you haven't done that before, or sitting down and composing poetry, even though you're very, very inexperienced with it. Or you can take something you're already good at and run with it, because all of these are going to lead to enrichment and a more positive you. Another great thing we can do is engage in community events that forge bonds outside of your extended community. Be those the art contests that were recently launched in TG, those are just fantastic. Engaging with others' works, read content, read blogs. There's so many people writing so many good things. Engaging with other polytheistic faiths and forging bridges and allyships. Just keep general ears to the ground, see what's going on with anybody else who may be in similar situations. And all of this leads to stronger, more productive people. Next slide, please. We also have self growth, mental and physical. It's all about improving your body and improving your mind. Next slide, please. The goal is to make the mind and body as strong and as capable as possible to withstand pressure and hardships. So we can continue the conflict against overwhelming chaos on a mortal scale in our everyday lives. It's incredibly important to us, and there's really only one guy that we thought of that we could go to for this, and that would be Ogmios. However, your mileage may vary. You may find other Devoy being more applicable to these roles for you too. So think of these as just where some of us are starting with this, but a lot of this is about personal development. So don't be married to every single one of these. But for us, the choice was obvious, and that's Ogmios. He's devoid of both extreme physical strength, but most importantly, as Nels touched on in his presentation for BNG, it's about evidence. He's capable of binding others to his will with just the use of his words, proving that mental fortitude and empathetic understanding of other people goes a lot farther than a big stick. Next slide, please. So physical improvement, strengthen your body and adopt healthy habits. It doesn't mean that every single person has to go hit the gym 4 hours a day. I mean, if that's not productive to you, or in fact detrimental, I wouldn't encourage you to do that. But what is important is that you do a sport, you join a league, join a gym, start running, pick up something that brings you joy, something that's going to strengthen you, and most importantly, something that you're going to keep doing. Next slide, please. And then we also have the mental improvement, disciplining your mind. I know that's kind of a loaded term. A lot of people throw that around a lot, but really what it means to us is identifying the things and concepts you struggle with, as well as negative habits and thought patterns. Aim to move around those and develop a plan of actions. Work to overcome your shortcomings, own your mistakes. So if there's a certain reaction that you struggle with, if you find yourself being, for lack of patience or quick to anger or unempathetic, a big part of what we do would be identifying those and working on them. This way we can improve ourselves and be more effective members of the community. Next slide, please. We also have our daily liminality. A lot of this is about growth. Growth is transition. It's about aiding others along with their growth and striving for the uncomfortable moments and not getting into your own way. Next slide, please. Really, what this part of the cultus is it informs a lot of the other ones, because it is about understanding when you are growing so that you may become a better person as soon as you're ready. You don't want to force growth. All that's going to do is stress you out. So the most important stuff that we do is waiting until we're ready. Oh, Kuno's faster than me. Belticados, the fair and shining one. So this is a really interesting deity that Kunos actually found. He's a horned god and champion of the lower social statuses, worshipped in Britain. He is often associated to both Mars and Belanos. Um, he is emblematic of the rising to the occasion and transcending of classes. So most of his reliefs and devotional items have been found in the homes of people of relatively lower social status, or at least that have been deemed so by archaeologists. Um, However, it was proof that these people were always striving. Their hero was a fair and shining god with antlers who was almost an unquestionable warrior. Um, Next slide, please. And as such, it fostered their personal growth. So the question is, if you have something aspirational like that, an example like that, how can you really fail? Check in with yourself from time to time. Are you where you want to be? A big part is devising a plan of action to get you to the next step. Do not fight your inner growth. Sometimes in our spiritual development, we'll hit a roadblock. We'll be like, oh, I'm not certain that, this is how I want my ritual structure to be. Oh, I'm not certain if the Devoy that I am currently worshiping is the right one for me. And sometimes we can dig our heels in a little bit instead of allowing that growth to come to us organically. So a big thing that especially Morikunos and I have been talking a lot about recently is opening yourself up to the possibility of change and not fighting the growth, because ultimately you may not be able to force the way that you develop. All right. The next one is spiritual growth and mental health, because a lot of the things that we do, a lot of the personal growth cultus can be very, very taxing over time. So a big part that we have to do is also rely on spiritual growth and mental health. Next slide. So we want to continue to honor ourselves by allowing ourselves time to rest and recover. It leads back to what I was talking about with Pavel Tsatsouline earlier. We want to further our relationships and understanding of the Devoy, those we're familiar with and those we're not familiar with. We want to understand their ways, their abilities. And for this, we figured Sepânioi. Next slide, please. Sepânioi, or Senuna, was a local goddess in Britain. She only has a few attested sites of worship. One of them, however, is a shrine near a spring that boasts one of the largest hoards of votive offerings of the Celtic world yet discovered. And she is a goddess of healing, replenishment, and honor. She spreads happiness and gives people the strength to fulfill their vows. She's sometimes equated with Minerva, and most of the offerings that were left there were proofs of fulfillments of vows. She was also a goddess of a hot spring. And she, next slide, was actually tangentially related to the development of the main character from Hellblade. So if anyone's played that, that's pretty cool. But that does kind of segue, because if you know what that game's about, next slide, it talks a lot about mental health. A lot of stuff can be emotionally taxing. In order to avoid burnout, it's important that we have mental self-care as a key tenet. You have to take time for yourself, adopt a stretching routine, take some long baths, write, journal, stick to a sleep schedule, meditate. All of these are great ways to honor Senuna as well as yourself. And last slide, we have spiritual growth. The culminations of a lot of the things that we do results in spiritual growth. While you could just do all these things and see spiritual growth come about, because there's all these different ways of self-improvement, and all of what SR does is integrating these things in your everyday life. It's still important to actively pursue it. And ways to honor Senuna this way would be to read as much as you can about Gaulish culture and the Devoy, both historical texts as well as new ones and community produced stuff. Reach out to gods you're not familiar with. Educate yourself about cognates of Dewa you may already be familiar with. So if you may be familiar with a Gaulish interpretation read up on the Irish or the Welsh. It may provide you with a little bit of perspective that you had not previously considered. And as such, you can keep deepening your relationship with the Dewi, which will ultimately make you a more enriched person. Last slide, please. All right. And thank you very much. I know we ran over time. I busted through this one as quickly as I could. I appreciate you dealing with my ramblings. And yeah, there's Cocytus as well. And he's got his arms up. Looks like he's waving.